Ruby, thanks so much for joining today because the topic is right up your alley. You are a really good coach when it comes to mindset, especially. And what I want to cover with you is how your fat loss mindset, in quotation marks, is holding you back from actually losing body fat. But before we start, I always want to give new guests the opportunity to introduce themselves to my audience. So, Ruby, who are you? What do you do? And why are you so awesome at it?
Hello, I'm Ruby, and I guess one of the reasons I'm awesome at the mindset side of it all is because I realized that despite doing all of the things, including what I was supposed to do to build muscle, to train really hard, the fact that my mind was always in dieting led to me never being happy with the end result. And this always comes down to the psychology of body image in general. It's like you can get the body that you want, you can look really lean, but you're still not going to see it physically in front of you if you haven't done the work there. And it's why so many others find it so hard to get the results that they want and even stick to something for long enough because they always find a way to sabotage themselves. So it's that kind of led me to being really passionate about women just finding something that excites them, that grows them, that strengthens them. And now my passion is just getting as strong as, I don't know if I can speak French, but as strong as hell, and being able to feel good in that and confident in that, because you don't get confidence from slashing calories and trying to stick meticulously to a diet. You get confidence from building a body, from realizing, which is going to factor into the fat loss mindset, realizing that, hey, you can do this. Hey, this is something that you can keep because you're learning in the process. You're building something that you know you can continue showing up to. Imagine struggling through a diet for the rest of your life. Like, that's not something I want to show up to when I'm 70. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't want to be struggling through a diet at that point either. And I want to tell the listeners where this podcast came from because I actually came up with this idea all of a sudden during a conversation with you on Instagram. I was doing a Q&A on my stories, and I answered a question where the question asker was asking me, should I stop dieting after a certain amount of time? And I said, well, as long as you have extra body fat to lose, you can keep dieting because I'm not aware of any physiological reason for which after a number of months you should take a break from a deficit. But I would say that I normally pause or stop a dieting phase when a client has accumulated excessive diet fatigue and or there are psychological reasons involved. And I didn't really go into detail explaining what I meant by psychological on that story. And then you responded, Ruby, you said, well, or because of life stress too. And that's when I thought, well, yeah, for me that falls under psychological reasons. And then you went on to say, people ignore the life stuff. It's so annoying. And I said, well, they don't know what they don't know. And it goes to show that we need to do a better job of covering it as coaches. And that's when you gave me, Ruby, a light bulb moment because you said, but even so, it's because of a deep fear of losing it all. And that's when I thought we need to do a podcast on this deep fear of losing it all.
Yeah, it's not just of losing it all, but then the fact that so many women, and actually anyone in general, because everyone wants to look good, but because I work primarily with women, I see this all the time. And we're always, I guess, your audience as well, because there's so many different like insecurities we have within our bodies, and we need to have this particular social image. So everything we do is, what is this going to say about me? What are they going to say about me if they see that I'm not losing weight anymore? I'm so attached to this dieting identity. And if that's all you've known, then that's all you're going to stick to. So it's, I guess, the fear of losing it all. But also, if you've only ever focused on fat loss and you don't know anything outside of that, then that is why the fat loss mindset is stopping you from losing fat. Because not only have you not allowed yourself to get yourself into a position to even start dieting properly, like, yeah, okay, cool, you have a lot of fat to lose, so ideally you should start in fat loss. No, actually, just because you have a lot of fat to lose does not mean that you are in a position to intentionally put all of your eggs into the fat loss bucket. It does not mean that you can't lose fat straight away. I highly recommend that getting into a healthy body fat range should be what you aim to do. And anyone, And everyone has the right to look like, you have the right to want to look good. You have the right to want to diet. But just because you can doesn't mean that you should. When you aren't in that place where you can trust that whatever you're building is something you can sustain, you're always going to have a fear of losing it all. And you're always going to have a fear of, what if I gain it all back? And if you have to struggle through that fat loss phase, and then you grind through and ignore all of the signs, because it doesn't matter whether there's life stress or whether you feel like that, like you need to get out of this diet. You're going to convince yourself that you're not in a place to eat more food. You're not lean enough yet. You're not there yet. Just a little more, just a little more. An analogy that I used in that podcast that I did was, it's just like running a marathon, sprinting it, starting out really hard and realizing that you're getting ahead. And then you get the dopamine rush because you're ahead. And then you're like, I'll just sprint a little bit more before I pull back. And then you do it again because, oh my God, this feels amazing. This feels amazing. Let's go. All of a sudden you have a stitch. Now it doesn't matter what the hell you do. You're not winning that race. You've lost. You had a head start. You had the chance to pull back, but you just said a little longer, and now you have a stitch. You've just lost the chance to win that race that you prepared your whole life for. And then if you didn't even prepare your whole life for it, you just went straight into it unprepared, now you have even more, I guess I can call it psychological damage, because you have less faith in yourself. So if you don't start yourself out on the right foot with faith in yourself, not trying another diet, which if that was the answer, you would have had the results by now, but focusing on it is not right for you right now. Like, you need to take that psychological stress off you so that you can build proof that you can build a maintenance lifestyle. And I think there's a lot of like, it's misconstrued what maintenance is when you are overweight, kind of thing. It's like, we don't want to put you into 3,000 calories if that's what the TDU calculator says, which is so inaccurate if you have a lot of weight to lose. I hate those things. If you're either really fit or you have a lot of weight to lose, they're not accurate. It's going to say something like, you maintain on 3,000 calories. We don't want you there because you're going to probably gain weight because your lifestyle isn't built for it. And it's not going off your actual lean body mass and how metabolic you are. Like, that, we're putting you into a maintenance lifestyle of the life that you want to live. What habits do you want to embody? What makes you feel good? What are the things that are holding you back? Because it's not a matter of what you need to do to get to where you want to be. You know that shit. You've done it before. What keeps getting in your way? Why can't you stay consistent? Why are you struggling all the time? Why do you feel like you don't have enough time? Is it because you're putting all of your eggs into the, I need to be the best I can at work, and then everything else gets sidetracked, so you can't stay consistent? So I guess the answer to that question in a roundabout way is, a lot of people can't do what they need to do for long enough to get to where they want to be, or do a diet deep enough to get the results they want, which is why I hate, just do the most sustainable deficit ever. Like, I changed my mind on this. I don't know whether you have a different opinion, but I don't believe that eating as many calories as you can to still see results is the best way for a diet. I feel like you should make it aggressive enough, but not too aggressive that you can't stick to it, for at least 8 weeks, so that you can do 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks in a fat loss phase, get the hell out of it for a diet break, and then get back in again. Because the longer that you go through that, even when there's the life stress is going on with the fear of losing it all, because, oh my God, then you're going to be teetottering, gaining, losing, because you find yourself in accidental maintenance, scared to increase your calories. And you're just reiterating the fear, I'm going to lose it all, because I'm showing to myself now, I can't stick to this. I keep overeating. I can't track all my food. I'm letting all these nibbles in. I'm snacking. Well, no fucking shit. Like, yeah, you just did that marathon person thing.
Absolutely. I have some thoughts in response to what you shared. One thing that was interesting for me that you said a bit early on was, whatever you're building should be something you can sustain. And that's so important, because I think one contributing factor to the fear of losing it all is that you're afraid that you're going to lose any progress that you've made, because deep down you know that there's only so long you can carry on with the approach that you're taking before you snap. So that comes back to what you were saying, Ruby. when you said, well, if you're building an unsustainable lifestyle, of course you're afraid of losing it all, because all it takes is a tiny pebble for you to fall over and lose the progress that you've made, and eat your way back to where you started, or maybe even regain weight. This is not to say that the calorie intake that you're going to have in a deficit is going to be the same forever. I don't want this to be misconstrued as in me saying, well, you start eating 1500 calories to lose fat, you lose the fat, and now you eat 1500 calories forever. That's not the case. But the habits that you build during a fat loss phase, if that's the first ever time that you're approaching fitness in with the view of making it sustainable for life, should be the same that you maintain when you then end that fat loss phase and you transition to a different phase. The only difference really is the amount of calories that you're going to be eating, but all of the choices that you make around food and movement are going to be likely very similar. And that brings me to the next point that you made, where you said, using the marathon analogy, you were ahead, you got a stitch, now you've lost the chance to be ahead because you didn't pull back. Coming back to what I was saying about the fact that you can only go so long before the wheels fall off, I think something that many don't really know how to do when they're going through a dieting phase, by no fault of their own, is knowing when it's time to pull back, which is where our conversation started, Ruby, because they think, and I understand that completely, because that's what I thought when I was younger. You start a diet and you carry on doing the exact same thing until you are done with the diet. And now, in some magical way, you're going to maintain your weight. It was never clear to me when I was learning about weight loss, and not fat loss, I specifically mean weight loss, as a young person. It was never clear to me how I was supposed to maintain those results. I assumed, well, what I was doing during the dieting phase, I keep doing, meaning I keep starving myself, because sadly I developed an eating disorder. But Ruby, you were buzzing in your seat right there as I was talking, so I'm assuming you have a response to this.
I I tried to condense like 10 Microsoft words into what I was saying before, and you just sparked so many thoughts. There was a podcast that you did with me where you mentioned this as well, where the more, like, as soon as we go into a diet, all of a sudden that becomes the focus. We become a lot more body critical. So, in being a lot more body critical, that is in itself going to keep us in the spiral of just a little more, just a little more. We don't see there being anything else sustainable, because now all of a sudden there's still that dissatisfaction with your body. You're not any happier with it, because obviously also a diet brain doesn't really feel all that happy with anything. You're only happy when you body check and it's like, oh my God, cool, I can see that I'm making progress. And it's really difficult to then, you're seeing fast progress in fat loss, but then anything else feels like nothing's happening. You get so used to that dopamine rush of going down the fat loss route. You're good at dieting, you're good at losing weight, but you've never been taught how to maintain. And I have had this conversation with quite a few people, but their main thing, including one of my clients actually, which I might talk about her if that might help the situation, but this particular not client, for her, it's, I need to make sure, it was for me as well, if you want to use me as an example for the scale, but I don't want to go over this scale number. She becomes attached to the scale number. But for her, it was, she spent most of her life being larger. She's so terrified to go back. You've been taught fat loss, and it's all that's pretty much marketed online. There is not enough mentioned at the stuff that actually builds the physique, because it's freaking boring. Like, yeah, let's just do the same exercises over and over again, and then do it all over again, and then do it all over again, and then feel like we're not making any progress, because the more advanced you are, the less progress there is, the less flashy it is. What else is there to talk about? Oh, I don't know. Let's talk about getting fast progress and going into a diet. So you've only known either being really large and gaining weight and losing control and not being able to stick to your diet, or you've known losing weight, feeling good, because now you're resembling some form of control. The human brain doesn't like uncertainty. It doesn't like not feeling in control. If you don't feel in control, you spiral. What can you do to grab control? I can control my diet. I can get more disciplined. And that's why I got excited in my seat, because we feel like we need more discipline. We can just push a little bit harder. I just need to tighten up more. But actual discipline is knowing when to pull back. Actual discipline is doing the thing you know you need to do when all of you wants to continue on down that route. That's what discipline is. Self-compassion is doing the shit that you know you need to do, but you have a fear not to do it, because that thing that you know you need to do is going away on you. It's going to be in your mind, and you're going to have a constant battle where I'm struggling with this. This is really hard, but I know that I can grind down harder. And this whole time, you're putting in all of this energy, but you're not really traveling anywhere. It's almost like the analogy as well. Like, yeah, okay, we need to put fuel in the car, but just putting fuel in the car isn't going to make it move. It actually needs to do the driving, and you can do the driving, but now where's the GPS pointing? Is it still pointing in the same, you're going around the roundabout, or are you actually heading somewhere where you're building the body that you want? Because deficits only reveal what you've spent time building. And when it comes to fat loss, you're not just building a lifestyle. I mean, you're not just building muscle, you're building a lifestyle there. You don't build a lifestyle in dieting. That is not sustainable. And you mentioned in there as well that you don't stay on the same calories after a diet. That's where I find most women afraid to go. So they try to justify everything of like reverse diets work for this. You're in confirmation bias. Everything that you see and hear, you see as true, and then you argue for it. And then social media, it's designed to feed you what you truly believe. It's AI. AI is getting good at it. So you're going to believe it more and more and more, because whatever you believe, you get fed. Whatever you want, you get fed. Your deepest desires that you've never even voiced is what comes up on your feed. So until we can pull ourselves out of that and realize that we need to build trust in ourselves and in our bodies. I trusted the process. I knew that that's what I needed to do. I was a coach when I was stuck in this. I knew all the shit. I trusted it. I didn't trust my body. I didn't trust that I could stick to what I needed to do, but it wasn't for me a fear of losing it all. It was, if I lose it all, I won't be able to be as strict and as disciplined and do the same thing again to undo all the damage that my coach now did to me, with quotation marks, because I can't stick to anything. I couldn't stick to anything. I'm struggling already. And that's why the diet mindset is stopping you from losing fat, because you are so fatigued from constantly thinking about dieting, getting leaner, wanting to lose this, that, and the other, that you don't have any faith that you can stick to shit, because you can't stick to your macros. You can't not nibble. You can't not crave things and give in to things. And when the office cookies come out, you give in to them, and then you go and comfort eat your ice cream, whatever it is that is your sabotaging factor. It is stopping you from believing that you can do things. So you want to cling on to every little bit of control that you can for where you are right now, just in case you slip backwards. And because of that, you don't even allow yourself to become all that you can be or to get what you want.
And at this point in the conversation, I can imagine some listeners thinking, well, Ruby, you're saying that I'm stuck in this fat loss mindset, but I'm not actually losing fat. Like, why would I raise my calories if I'm not seeing fat loss? And this is the difference between being in a fat loss mindset and actually losing body fat. The difference is that you think that you are always achieving a calorie deficit because for 5 days out of the week, you are eating 1500 calories, you are in this supposed calorie deficit. But then when you have that slip up, when you finally snap, what happens is maybe you have uncontrolled eating or even a binge over the weekend. That's when you don't track those calories. So you're only looking at Monday to Friday when you were, in quotation marks, really good. And you're thinking, well, surely 2 days out of the week that I slept up over the weekend won't be that bad. And as long as I go back to what I was doing on Monday, it will all be fine. But actually, 2 days can throw you out of a deficit. So if you think I'm putting so much effort into this diet, but I'm not actually losing fat, the reason is very simply you are not in a calorie deficit on average over time. Meaning, if you're eating 1500 calories for 5 days, but then you're eating 3000 calories on 2 days that you are not accounting for, your average calories for the week are way higher than 1500. They could be so high as to put you in what Ruby defined accidental maintenance. And this is the worst place to be, where you think that you're working towards fat loss, but then at the end of the day, because of the self sabotage, you're not in an actual calorie deficit. So your mindset is a mindset of deprivation, where you're focused on taking food away from you 5 days out of the week. But the result of your behaviors, which come from that deprivation mindset, is accidental maintenance. Sometimes it's even a surplus where you find yourself that you're gaining weight. This causes that fear that you need to be always on low calories, because if you aren't, you're going to gain weight that you don't want to gain. When if you actually had that sustainable lifestyle that Ruby and I are talking about, if when you knew when to pull back and when to push, instead of always pushing until life pulls back for you, meaning you end up overeating, then you would be able to achieve your calorie target as an average across the week for long enough to actually see fat loss. And eventually, you would be able to increase your calories because, again, you're in control of your behaviors. You're no longer starving yourself for 5 days and overeating for two. You're eating a more moderate amount of calories, and you're able to, therefore, be in not accidental but intentional maintenance, which is the best place to be. Being intentional with what you do is the ideal. It's what coaches like Ruby and I want for all of our clients. Because if you're by accident losing body fat, you won't be happy with it. That typically happens when somebody is undergoing a period of extremely high stress, and so they'll lose somebody that's close to them, and they lose their appetite, they lose body fat, but it's unintentional. They're not happy about it. Similarly, if they gain weight, and it's unintentional, they're unhappy about it. If they're maintaining when their goal is different, they're unhappy about it. So the common denominator here is that they're not intentional about what they're doing. And how can you be intentional? You need to learn when to be aggressive and how aggressive to be. Back to the point you were making earlier, Ruby, you used to believe, let's diet on the highest amount of calories that we possibly can. And now you think, let's diet on the lowest amount of calories that we can sustain for at least until our next break out of a deficit, where we return to maintenance for a period of time. I largely agree with that. And what that looks like will depend on the person. Typically, if somebody is very new to dieting the more intentional way, um, that calorie amount will likely be a little bit higher, because they need to learn, as you say, Ruby, to trust themselves before they can drop their calories really low. Because whenever they try to drop their calories low, too low for them, they end up overeating. Whereas when somebody has been in the game for a long time, like you and me, Ruby, if our coach says, hey, let's do 1,000 calories for 5 days, well, we're not going to be happy about it, but we can stick with it without overeating. It's not because we're better people. We've just built the tools that we are trying to communicate to our clients now, to develop that resilience, that discipline, that self-compassion, where ironically, we're not telling ourselves, try harder, you're a piece of shit. You can definitely swear on this podcast, Ruby. If you can't do it, you don't want it bad enough. That's not what we're telling ourselves. We're actually listening to our own coach when the coach says, hey, you push yourself really hard. How about we take 2 days where we increase calories to maintenance? Our thought isn't, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose it all. Because we've built the resilience that we need to say, 2 days at maintenance, I'm not going to blow those calories out of the water, even though I've had 1,000 for 5 days, because it's just the right time for me to pull back. I am willing to pull back. And I know that these 2 days at maintenance are not going to ruin my progress, because something that comes up with my clients is the thought that when you return to maintenance calories, even if you don't have issues with overeating, even if you have been losing body fat so far, going back to maintenance means that you're stagnating, or even you're regaining body weight back, even though rationally you know it's maintenance, I'm not going to gain that weight back. But you get so used to the deficit calories that you think that any more calories is wrong. It's going in the wrong direction. And it's teasing apart those thoughts and rationalizing them that's so important for you to be able to move forward. Ironically, I keep saying this, but it's true. Making dieting more effective means that you actually make it feel easier for yourself rather than harder. I think that between social media and what we were conditioned to believe growing up, we were always taught, at least I was always taught, that exercise should feel hard, dieting should feel hard, and you should basically go until you drop and fake it till you make it. Or at the very least, if you can't make it, it's because you're not disciplined enough. You don't have willpower. When if you look at any athlete's program, they have periods where they train really hard and periods where they barely train. They're pulling back and pushing. And it's getting the rhythm of this push pull right that gives you the best results for your efforts. It's not pushing all the time, but it's also not pulling back all the time because you need to put your body under a certain amount of stress, the stress being a calorie deficit in the case of a diet, for example, in order to get the result that you want. But it can't be too much stress, otherwise the house is on fire and the wheels fall off. And it also needs to be just enough to make progress. It can't be too little, otherwise you're just going to spin your wheels.
I have a lot of notes on that because that was amazing. The eating more part is something that I'm huge on, and I know it's something you're huge on too. And there is a part that I'm going to mention that we probably differ because it's what I see in my clientele and what I see in general. So, eating more, yes, just because you're eating more doesn't mean you're just going to build the physique. Like most people here aren't here to just lose fat and get small or just eat more and learn how to maintain. Like we're here to build a physique. That's who you coach. That's who I coach. We're eating more strategically. But just because you're eating more does not mean you're building muscle. It is facilitating it. And I did a podcast for this. It's the only reason you should really be micromanaging your food to any degree is if you've been pushing your training for long enough to then warrant you micromanaging your food. All you need is sufficient protein and getting your food good enough with a structure that is good enough, and then use that as your fuel to have your best performance. That's all. And then you'll need to do the nuances with the training, the nuances with the food if you need to go to that next level, but no one really needs to. Those nuances and that micromanaging should be going into your training because that's the only thing that is going to build the body that you want. It's the training, it's pushing it, it's worrying about all the little details there. And then when you're dieting, the further you go into dieting, it's all the little nuances and things over there. It's like know which tool for which job. You need strategy with your food. So if you only know eating more, I get fat, I gain weight, it's because you're focusing on the wrong things and you're still in the fat loss mindset. You can't use fat loss tools for a building physique vehicle. Like your car is for building, then you need to get the head on top of it, not still have your head on the trailer that you didn't even attach to the car. So there we go. And most people, they don't really know what builds a physique, and they don't really know that you can't diet your way to a physique, and it's not built in one fat loss phase. And like you mentioned, so many people fear gaining fat and maintenance. Well, of course you do. Of course you do. Because that's all that's ever happened before. Because you were never intentional with it. You were never doing it in a way that's, I'm doing this to fuel myself. And if you were at maintenance, it was either accidental maintenance or in and out flip-flopping between, okay, I want to build. Actually, no, I'm feeling fluffy. I want to cut back down again. Wait, no, I want to build. And building, if you've given yourself enough time, if that enough time is only 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 4 months, 5, 6 months, that is not enough time to build the body that you want. I'm sorry, but it's not, especially as a female. We don't build that much muscle. But you're a newbie, yeah, okay, cool. But if you're also a newbie, then you're going to be gaining a lot more weight. And if you're not comfortable with that, then you didn't build that much muscle in 6 months. Because the potential that you have to build muscle as a newbie is huge. If you allow yourself to. If you're not clinging to the scale, because the scale isn't the problem, your perspective on it is. The scale is the worst measure for body composition. And it does not allow you to be your most confident self, because how can you be confident if everything you do is dictated by that scale? Like that's going to dictate how you train in the gym, because your legs are going to get bulky after a training session because now they're filled with glycogen. So if you still have this fat loss mindset, you're not going to be doing what you need to do to build muscle. So then you're not going to get lean like you want to get lean, because you keep hitting against the same wall every single time you build. So how do you expect to lose fat when weight training and building muscle is the most potent tool for losing fat and for fat loss? And it's also why doctors should be prescribing weight training, because it's the most potent thing for stimulating fat loss. It biases it and it sustains and maintains muscle mass. It is very expensive metabolically, which is kind of the part that you might not agree on. But the more time that you spend going flip-flopping between eating more, eating less, you're not eating enough or doing anything strategically to build muscle because you're not even focused where it matters most. And you're not eating low enough for long enough to lose fat. So that is why your deficit is leading to you gaining more fat, because it hasn't actually been a deficit. Like, yeah, okay, cool, you're eating little calories, but it's not actually a deficit. And if you're a small human like you're a small human, I'm a small human. If you're a sedentary female, if you're sedentary in general, if you're a female in general, even if you're in menopause, because building muscle is so much harder if you're in menopause, but you can still lose fat just as easily because fat loss is just a measure of where your calories are. Building muscle, that is a completely different process. It is going to take so much more effort, so much more time, so much more patience to build muscle to get lean as an older woman in post or perimenopause, but you will still be able to lose fat. So is it really a fat loss issue or is it a mindset issue? Because you're not going to allow yourself to do what you need to do. Like they say, I know Amanda Thebes said this as well. Eating disorders are most rampant in puberty and in perimenopause because of the changes your body is going through and because of the hormones. So if you cannot give yourself the time to get out of this mental funk that you're in, what are you giving up by not giving up fat loss? It's not giving up fat loss. It's you're chasing fat loss and giving up everything else. And it can be really easy to feel like you're going to binge and you're going to let go and not be able to stick to what you need to stick to when all you've ever had your mind on is fat loss. Even when you're eating more, you're thinking about getting leaner. Even when you're eating more, you're beating upon how big your legs are and how much you want to get leaner and how much you don't like your body, this, that, and the other. That is still a diet mindset, regardless of whether you're seeing your body go down. That's what you started your last segment on, saying, well, how am I in a diet mindset if I'm not losing weight? And that's the thing. You're gaining fat in a deficit, in deficit calories, because those deficit calories aren't working for you when the littlest things can take you out of a deficit. Because if you're not fueling your day, you're not moving around as much. So those deficit calories aren't your deficit calories. And you're not really training the best that you can be training because there's no actual fuel there. There's no oomph there. There's you eating little calories on the days where you're doing the hard ass efforts. And then on the weekends that are your rest days, that's when you're eating more food. It's like everything's skewed. And the more that you keep yourself in this cycle, chasing less fat loss, it's no wonder you don't trust yourself. You haven't, not once, thought about what can I build? What is it that I actually do want my life to look like? How do I want to feel? Am I actually enjoying this constant freaking mental masturbation that's going on in my head? Do I actually feel like I'm thriving right now? How do I feel when I'm wanting to have a social moment with my partner, with my friends? How do I feel when I'm walking into the gym? What is the first thought on my mind? Have I even been getting stronger over time? Am I chasing a deadlift max? Am I chasing pull-ups? Like, what is going to make me feel my best? And do I want to continue the spiral? Like I said, how do you want your 75 to look? Like, do you want to be strong? Or is it just putting it off because of how time warped we are as humans?
Before I respond to that, because you're bringing up a lot of thoughts, Ruby, I just want to say, could you mute your mic when you're taking notes in response to what I say? Because they're coming through on my end, so I think the audience will hear you typing. Anyway, so I think that what you're bringing up is the fact that being in a fat loss mindset ends up leaking into other phases of the physique development process, because you're saying, even if you're eating more, even if you supposedly committed to what some people call a building phase, some people call a bulking phase, essentially you committed to being in a calorie surplus for the purpose of building more muscle. You've not truly committed to it because you're still beholden to the number on the scale, and you were conditioned to want that number on the scale to stay lower. But what you also brought up, Ruby, is that the scale is not going to show the progress that you want to see in your physique. The scale is not going to tell you that you built 5 kilograms of muscle and that's why the number is higher. It's just going to show you that number. And yes, I know there are bioelectrical impedance scales, BIA scales, where they can measure supposedly your body fat. But I recorded a podcast on this. They are inaccurate. They can't measure your body fat and your muscle mass. Realistically, all you're going to see on a scale that you can trust is your relationship to gravity on that particular day, in that particular moment in time. You're going to see a number that doesn't differentiate between fat and muscle. But what you actually want is what's called body recomposition, whereby, as Ruby says, you're going to get leaner, or your physique is going to look leaner through the process of building more muscle. And that can seem counterintuitive because I'm saying this, but if you listen to my podcast on my comprehensive guide to bulking, which was only a couple of episodes ago in episodes 139 and 140, I did specifically state if you go into a surplus, you need to expect and accept, and Ruby, you alluded to this, you are going to gain some body fat in addition to muscle. Unfortunately, we can't, just like we can't spot diet, we can't decide to lose fat from our belly versus our arms. We also can't spot bulk, where we choose to just gain muscle and no fat. But body recomposition doesn't happen just in the phase in a surplus, and it doesn't just happen in the phase in a deficit. It happens throughout all of these phases. We bring all of these phases together to achieve a leaner and more muscular physique, whereby when you are in a surplus, we are going to maximize muscle growth and minimize fat gain. But a little bit of fat is still going to happen regardless. And when we go into a fat loss phase, that's when we want to uncover the muscle we have built. But as Ruby says, if you are stuck in this mindset where every time the scale goes up by a half a kilogram, you freak out and you try to go back into a deficit, you flip-flop between I want to build muscle and I want to lose body fat, the average of your behaviors, again, think about it this way, for weeks on end, for 4 weeks, you're committed to this surplus, you're eating more calories than you burn, you put on, in 4 weeks, half a kilogram. That makes you freak out. Now, for the next 2 weeks, you go down to a deficit, 1500 calories. You're like, I really need to tighten things up. The scale is going up. That's not good. Now, the average of your behaviors over those 6 weeks is again unintentional maintenance. So what happens is, yes, the scale goes down by half a kilogram again, and you're like, yay. And then you look in the mirror 6 months later, following this approach where you flip-flop between the two, and all you've done is be really uncomfortable for 4 weeks because the scale was going up a bit, and then put yourself in a deficit. So the average is maintenance. So now we're not really building muscle, and your physique in the mirror doesn't look any different. So what have you done? The scale has stayed the same. And that's what you wanted because you were so afraid of the scale going up. Because, again, of this deep fear that you would lose your discipline and you would never be able to get the number back down. But your physique also hasn't moved an inch, literally. And ultimately, that's why you don't look at your physique doesn't look any leaner, because it's when you build muscle and that muscle pushes against the skin that it makes your skin look more taut. And through the process of body recomposition, you're going to accomplish building a little bit more muscle, losing a little bit more fat. And as a result, you look more athletic, you look leaner, more toned, as people like to say, and you're going to like your physique better. And for beginners, as Ruby says, the potential for building muscle is much greater than for anyone else. So you may see that you're looking leaner as you build muscle. So technically you're in a surplus, but you're seeing yourself getting leaner. That's because you can outpace basically the speed at which you build muscle outpaces the speed at which you would gain body fat. So as a result of that, your muscle percentage, your percentage of lean mass or muscle mass goes up. Weight stays relatively stable or goes up, but the percentage is still going up in terms of lean mass. And so as a result, in percentages, if 1% goes up, the other percentage needs to go down. And when we're talking about body composition, we're talking about lean mass or fat-free mass percentage and fat mass percentage. So if the fat-free mass percentage is going up, even if your weight moves up a bit or stays relatively stable, fat mass percentage is going down. And so as a result, beginners are basically super lucky because they can see the extra fat loss occurring even as they are supposedly in a little bit of a surplus, or at least at maintenance calories. When you're a seasoned lifter like me, that ain't gonna happen. I ain't seeing any body recomposition if I'm bulking. I am gaining muscle for sure, but I am also gaining body fat. And I accept that because I can still achieve body recomp. It's just going to happen in two phases. So instead of that happening when I'm at maintenance calories or in a slight surplus, now it's occurring across multiple phases where in a surplus, I focus on building muscle, and in a deficit, I focus on building body fat. So, Ruby, that's my response to what you said. But what I want to move on to is something you brought up earlier, where we need to build resilience in order to get out of this fat loss mindset and actually make progress with our physique, whatever phase we may be in. And sometimes building resilience requires actually going through our worst fear. In this case, the fear of losing it all, of losing progress. And that brings me to a very interesting part of the conversation, in my view, which has to do with the holiday, Ruby, that you recently went on, where you had a certain goal at the beginning, and you actually didn't achieve that goal despite your best efforts, at least based on what you said on Instagram when you got back. And I'm not just throwing you under the bus, I'm going to give you time to explain this. But I think it's so important to say, first of all, as coaches, we're not always perfect. We also lose progress sometimes. But second of all, it's what's important isn't to never lose progress or going backwards. It's how you respond to it. Because if you respond by catastrophizing, losing a little bit of progress, that's why then you end up that ends up snowballing into losing a lot of progress because you try to go too extreme, you can't sustain that, and now not only have you lost a bit of progress, but you find yourself going backwards because you're eating your way back to all the way that you've already come. Whereas if you can respond differently, if you learn to respond differently, you learn to be resilient in the face of adversity, of missing out on the goal that you had. That's how you actually propel yourself forward. And yes, sometimes you take a step back, but most of the time you take steps forward, as opposed to taking a step back once, freaking out, and now ending up trying to take steps forward, but because it's too unsustainable, now you're taking 5 steps back. And now you're even further back than you were when you had that little slip up. But anyway, Ruby, I'll pass the ball back onto you so that you can talk about this topic and add your own experience of the cruise that you went on.
That last part that you said actually relates to the bridge between all of this, because people are so quick to chase this end goal. Let's try and make everything better. Let's try to refine my physique even more, even more, even more. But if you've never learned how to also build up your floor, then you're going to keep any time that you fall back, you're going to fall back to your same settings. Your default settings are bullshit. That's something I used to say all the time. I forgot that I used to say that, but that was something that was my query. It's like your default settings are bullshit. You can do all the software changes and software updates on your phone, but it doesn't inherently change the hardware. You're going to need to upgrade your phone because it's always going to go back to the same bullshit thing every time that you factory reset it. And you don't like that because it's bullshit. Like, that's you. You need to build that up, upgrade yourself. And the only way you can upgrade yourself, like you said, is to go through the discomfort, which I guess this can kind of tie into when I finally got myself to that, like what I had to do to be able to build the trust that I'm about to tell you now. So when I first got into I need to build, obviously I didn't have the faith that I could lose it again. And I built that trust from proving it to myself only after I went through the discomfort. I don't know. It was that I think that resilience that I built was from finding a different focus that allowed me to find something that gave what I do more concreteness. Like, it gave me something that sustained, because what I was doing wasn't sustainable. I felt like shit. Whereas when I was actually fueling myself, I felt better. And lo and behold, when I actually did a fat loss phase, it actually worked. Like, what the fuck? Like, how is this working? I've struggled so long to get my weight down. And the part of this is I actually gained, You go by kilos too. Great. I actually gained like around 6 kilos in the time that I did my building phase. But I wasn't even obsessing over fat loss back then. It's like, cool, there's the idea of it, but I liked eating more food. And I actually never wanted to get my food cut, but I was able to cut. This is where you need to just get in and get it done. I got it aggressively cut. And this is kind of why you stay stuck not seeing the results that you want. Because if you're going to peak patter, anytime you're in a deficit, you're not building. You're at best maintaining, because what you need to do in a deficit is not going to be allowing you to fuel your best performance when muscle is metabolically expensive. So you can either try to prove to yourself that you can by doing the hard thing, or you can continue to prove your story is true that you can't do the thing. And because I proved to myself that I can do the thing and I know that how to lose it, the only hard thing now to do is always the discomfort of let's eat more, let's embrace getting bigger, let's embrace getting softer, because you're going to get softer over time. And I really feel like this is important to touch on before I talk about the holiday, because you mentioned that you are going to see that leanness come in because you're outgrowing in muscle at a greater rate than the fat. But this is the part that no one talks about. That only happens for the beginning period of time. What's going to happen after that? You're going to have to be okay with getting softer, because there is only a certain period of time that you're going to see that payoff. And then what? Are you going to get triggered by your clothes feeling tight, by looking softer, by not liking how big and ill that you feel? You don't feel like you don't feel comfortable in your skin anymore because it's not lean, it's not showing lines, it's not showing what you wanted to see, and it's slow, and you're not going to see changes. Just like you said, we're far in our journey now. We're not going to see the changes straight away. And even if you're not far in your journey, if you're still using the same metrics of progress of losing weight, you're gonna keep proving to yourself over and over that you can't do it. And once you can be okay with slow change and not seeing much change, then you're going to be okay with whatever happens on holidays, because you trust that you can do what you need to do to get it undone, quote unquote, if you need to get it undone. But just because you can, should you? And funnily enough, just returning into my usual routine, after about a couple of weeks, my body felt normal again. That's all you need to do. You fall back to those habits, because trigger shooting and going into let's cut everything, let's go into diet mode, let's damage control, isn't going to get you to where you want to be any faster when your goal is to build the body that you want. Like if you're in a fat loss phase, just going back to where you were before holidays is probably a great place to be. Even going to a maintenance phase is a great place to be before going into a diet again. Because if you overate on holidays, just going in maintenance phase is enough to make you feel more normal and build those habits again, without going from eating in excess to eating in hardly anything and then having all the cravings and binging and losing control. And that's where building resilience comes from. That's where doing the process comes from, because I didn't even consider it, but I'm guessing if I considered slashing my calories to lose whatever it was that I lost, because I was assuming that because I was starving. They serve the tiniest of freaking portions, and restaurants serve the most calorie dense dishes. You don't even expect them to be calorie dense. And I'm someone who likes eating huge meals. I'm starving. I'm like, I'm eating 2 meals. I ate 2 meals for lunch and 2 meals for dinner. And I ate the world out of the buffet because I knew that I was going to be hungry by lunch, and I only have 3 meals a day to eat. What do you expect? I didn't train. I walked a lot, but it's like I was still hungry. So I didn't really expect all that much, but I did gain, and I felt puffier when I got back. But I just got back into my usual routine and I felt better again. And that's all you need to be able to lean back on. But if you've never learned what maintenance lifestyle is, and if all you know is fat loss, you're going to go do damage control. You don't have something to fall back to. You're going to go back between this flip flop. Oh my God, I gained weight. I'm picking apart every part of it. Like, there is so much damage that comes with this constant pursuit of less, less, less. Even if you feel like you have fat to lose, you might not even have fat to lose. It might just be an under muscled issue, but you're always going to see it that way until you start to find something that is growing you and building something that, like you said, something that sustains, something that gives you oomph, something that just excites you to show up, not something that's just like punishment, or I need to shrink myself, or I need to change myself because that's what we're told. I need to look a certain way. I want to feel pretty in my clothes. I want to fit my clothes. I want this to look good. but what if this person says this about me? If you're always, it's like, who are you even doing this for? And what's the rush? Like, what is the rush? Because the more that you try to rush it, the more that you realize you're wasting time and running out of time. And you said that we also lose progress as coaches, and it's your response to it. But I don't think it's just that. I think it's, we also know what to do, and we know that we can get it back. It's not just what you do, but what you don't do. That also plays a role. And just because we know how to get it back, we also know the benefits and the positives, and we're sure in ourselves in our journey forward. And you cannot build that mindset if staying in fat loss, trying to overstay fat loss, being in fat loss, if that's all you know. So you need to allow yourself to live in this messy middle place, because we're not just meant to bulk forever either. And I hate that word. We're not meant to build forever. We're not meant to diet forever. And it's not just diets that you need to earn, it's surpluses you need to earn as well. So if you only have known the mindset of, I want to always be chasing something and seeing progress somewhere, so you're either in a diet or in a surplus and you've never experienced the middle, what do you expect? Because you're not meant to go from diet to bulk or bulk to diet. Like, there's this middle place. There's this, let's figure out where I am right now, and I can actually do quite a lot of maintenance. You don't have to always be in one or the other. And you don't need to be in a surplus if you haven't yet maxed out your maintenance phase. Or if you are a smaller human, that's when you need to go into a surplus. But then again, this is where you need a coach, because you don't see yourself as you are. And that's why I say to my coach as well, I'm like, you need to tell me what I need to do with my stuff and tell me what I look like, because I don't know what I look like. I only see what I see, and I know that it's not accurate. So you're going to have to tell me. And it's only now that I've been through the process that I understand that. So I don't trust my eyes. He needs to tell me. And so many women are scared. So they won't hand over that control because they need that control. And that's exactly what building resilience gifts you. Trust that you can put in the actions to get to where you want to be. But if you've only ever focused on being, not the actions, as in like getting to the outcome and not the process, then how can you have any faith in a process that you've never actually focused on or even built or became acquainted with?
Thank you, Ruby. This was an excellent conversation. I'm going to wrap this up. For my dear listeners, thank you for checking in to this podcast today. And if you feel that you're stuck in this fat loss mindset that Ruby and I have been talking about, to summarize in short, a conversation that was really deep and that I found really thought-provoking, and I hope you do as well. What you want to focus on is building trust with yourself, building trust in the process that, as Ruby said, you've never actually quite committed to, building trust in a process that's not just about staying in a deficit or attempting to get smaller all the time. It's a process that requires pushing and pulling. It requires different phases. And because of these different requirements, it requires your body to change. And you can only build trust with yourself that you will be able to change in the way that you want if you learn to go through all of the changes with a resilient mindset and not to freak out and course correct in quotation marks when some change is uncomfortable for you, because there will be times when you are uncomfortable and you will be able to build your physique through those times, thanks to those times, not despite those times, but thanks to them. So Ruby, to conclude the conversation, I want to give my listeners the opportunity to connect with you if they want. So let them know where to find you, and I'll add all the links in the show notes.
You can find me on the 100% Real with Ruby podcast, which whether you can get them or I can send them to you. As you've heard, Nikias I looked at the name. I'm like, I don't know how to say it, but I looked at the name down the bottom, and that's how it said. Nikias has been on my podcast twice, and I feel like our last one is fundamental to this conversation as well, because at the very end, he spoke about just how big of a role body image plays in all of this. And it's not just the physical part, but it's how, yeah, I would highly recommend that podcast. But you can find me on Transform X Ruby everywhere else. And I would also say, just because it feels uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just different. And different doesn't mean it's bad. So I really wanted to end with that, because I feel like that's huge, where you feel like any sign of discomfort means something's bad. But yeah,
I agree. It's through discomfort that we grow. And on that note, Ruby, thank you so much. Dear listeners, thanks for tuning in, and I will talk to you next time.